Have you ever felt like you're chasing something, only to realize it's never enough? For years, Sarah lived a life full of success, money, fame, and everything that seemed to define happiness. But behind the flashing lights and perfect posts, she was empty. One day, everything changed. A sudden loss shattered her world, and in the midst of her pain, a voice in her heart whispered, "This is your last chance." What do you do when the things you've placed your faith in crumble? How do you face the truth when it feels too late? Stay with us as we dive into Sarah's wake-up call, a story of finding peace when everything else fails. Sarah sat in her plush apartment, the soft glow of the evening sun filtering through the curtains, casting long shadows across the floor. She scrolled through her phone, her eyes scanning the constant stream of notifications, likes, comments, and messages from people praising her. On the surface, everything in Sarah's life seemed perfect. She had the followers, the attention, the glamorous lifestyle that many envied. But as the screen lit up with each new notification, a heavy feeling settled in her chest. She had spent years building her online persona, carefully curating every post, every image, every word to project a life of success and happiness. Yet tonight, it felt hollow. As she admired her latest post, the comments flooded in. Living your best life. Your goals. But inside, Sarah felt emptier than ever. The likes and praises were fleeting, the excitement temporary, and the void within her seemed to grow with every new post. She had convinced herself that all of this, the material success, the validation, was what would bring her happiness. The more people admired her, the more she felt that she was worth something. But tonight, for the first time, she couldn't escape the thought that something was missing. She had everything anyone could want, a successful career, fame, wealth, but none of it seemed to fill the emptiness in her heart. She felt like she was living someone else's life, a life designed for likes and comments, not for peace or meaning. Sarah's gaze shifted to the window, where the city lights twinkled in the distance, but it all seemed so far away, so disconnected from her. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, trying to silence the thoughts that had begun to cloud her mind. But no matter how much she tried to push them away, the questions remained. Is this really the life I've always wanted? Why does this feel so empty? She opened her eyes and looked at her reflection in the window, her phone still in hand. For a moment, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. This was who she had become, a person defined by followers and likes. And yet, despite all the attention, despite all the success, she felt lost. As the hours passed, Sarah's thoughts spiraled. She scrolled through social media, one post after another, but it didn't help. The comments, the likes, they no longer had the power to lift her. She had spent so long trying to fill the void with external validation, but it was never enough. The more she fed into the pursuit of success and recognition, the deeper the emptiness seemed to grow. The truth was undeniable now. She was chasing something that couldn't give her peace. The question that had been buried in her heart for so long resurfaced. Is this all there is to life? As she sat in the silence of her apartment, the weight of it all pressed down on her. She had built a life based on appearances, on what others thought of her. But deep down, Sarah knew it wasn't real. It wasn't fulfilling. With a heavy heart, she put her phone down. For the first time in years, Sarah felt the weight of the life she had been living. The pursuit of likes, the constant validation, it was all just a distraction, a temporary fix. She knew now that she had been running from something, but she didn't know what. Maybe it was the fear of facing the truth, or maybe it was the realization that she had neglected something far more important than her social media image, her soul. Sarah turned off the lights and sat in the dark, her thoughts consuming her. What have I been doing all this time? She knew she couldn't keep living this way. It wasn't the success, the fame, or the wealth she had dreamed of. It was something deeper, something that had been missing for too long. The days following the loss felt like they had stretched into eternity for Sarah. Each morning, she woke up to the weight of grief, as though the air itself had thickened. The familiar routine she had relied on, the endless social media updates, the appointments, the photo shoots, seemed distant, almost irrelevant now. Her life, once filled with excitement and validation, suddenly felt like a dream she could no longer wake up from. She felt an overwhelming emptiness, like a part of her had been lost forever. In the quiet of her apartment, Sarah sat with a cup of tea, her eyes fixed on the window as the outside world continued to rush by. The city below seemed unaware of the storm raging inside her. She felt like a stranger in her own life. The lavish events, the parties, the endless cycle of photos and posts, none of it seemed to matter anymore. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was profoundly wrong. As the days wore on, Sarah began to experience moments that, though subtle, were impossible to ignore. It was as though the universe was sending her signs, warnings really. She would open a book and the words would jump out at her. Turn back before it's too late. Or she'd hear a conversation between friends and the words would echo in her heart. This is the last chance. Even a simple song on the radio, one she had heard 1,000 times, now seemed to carry a deeper meaning. It was one evening, as she scrolled mindlessly through her phone, that Sarah came across a post that made her stop. It was a verse from the Quran. "And whoever fears Allah, He will make a way for him to get out from every difficulty." Sarah read it over and over, her heart heavy with the realization that she had been turning to everything else, fame, recognition, validation, but not to Allah. In that moment, she realized that her focus had always been outward, seeking approval from the world, but she had neglected the one source of peace and guidance that could truly heal her heart. The weight of this realization felt like a jolt to her system. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "What have I been doing?" she thought. The truth hit her with full force. She had been running from her own soul, trying to fill a deep void with things that would never satisfy her. She had neglected her spiritual well-being in pursuit of worldly success, and now the emptiness that had always been there seemed unbearable. The voice inside her heart, the one she had been trying to ignore, became louder and clearer. "This is your last chance to turn back. This is your moment to change." Sarah felt a deep shift within her. She knew that this moment, the weight of her grief, the realization of her emptiness, and the signs that seemed to be leading her back to Allah, was a wake-up call she could no longer ignore. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that came from external success or fleeting pleasures. It was a deep, soul-deep hope, a sense that if she could just reconnect with her faith, she could find the peace she had been searching for all along. Sarah stood up and walked to her desk, where her Quran sat, collecting dust. She hadn't opened it in months. Hesitantly, she picked it up, feeling a sense of reverence and guilt all at once. But there was no turning back now. She opened the Quran, and the words spoke directly to her soul. Indeed, with every hardship, there is ease. Sarah sat quietly in the corner of her apartment, the silence around her almost deafening. The phone, once her constant companion, lay on the table beside her. She hadn't looked at it in hours, and somehow that felt like a small victory. The constant cycle of notifications, likes and comments no longer seemed important. The noise of the world outside her small circle had become overwhelming, but for the first time she felt like she could breathe. The realization of how far she had strayed from her true self hit her hard. She had spent so many years seeking validation from the outside world, chasing the next deal, the next photo op, the next big success, hoping it would bring the fulfillment she desperately sought. But in the stillness of her grief and self-reflection, she finally saw the truth. None of it had ever brought her peace. She had been living for the applause of others, while neglecting the quiet whisper of her heart, the call to something far greater than fame or material gain. Sitting on the floor, Sarah closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to just be. She reflected on the times she had prayed, the moments of closeness to Allah that she had once cherished, but had slowly let slip away in the pursuit of worldly success. She remembered the peace she felt after a sincere dua, the comfort in knowing that Allah was always there, even when everything else felt uncertain. But she had lost that connection, distracted by the bright lights of the world, which had promised her happiness, but only delivered emptiness. In her heart, a question began to rise. How did I get here? The answer was clear, but painful. She had allowed herself to be swept away by the current of superficiality, chasing after things that never truly mattered. And now, the universe had shaken her, sending her a warning that she could no longer ignore. Her heart ached with the knowledge that she had wasted time on things that had no lasting value, but Sarah wasn't ready to let this realization crush her. Instead, she felt a quiet, growing sense of hope. The same voice that had whispered to her in her grief, "This is your last chance," now offered her the path forward. She had been given a wake-up call, an opportunity to return to her faith, to reconnect with the part of her soul that longed for something deeper. She stood up and walked to the shelf, pulling down her Quran. It had sat there for months, untouched. She felt a sense of guilt wash over her as she opened it, but that guilt was accompanied by something else, something brighter, hope. She placed her hand on the book and said a simple prayer, "O Allah, guide me back to you." Her voice was shaky, but it was real. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt the weight of her actions, and yet she also felt a sense of relief, as if she were taking the first step back to her true self. The first verses she read seemed to speak directly to her. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the words to sink in. I have been given this hardship, she thought, but with it, I can find the ease of reconnecting with Allah. That realization was powerful. It wasn't too late. She had been given a second chance, not just to return to her faith, but to rediscover the peace that she had lost. Her heart began to shift. She realized that this wasn't a punishment, it was an opportunity. Sarah had been given a moment to re-evaluate her life, to reconsider her choices, and to find the path that would lead her to true happiness. This moment wasn't just a wake-up call, it was the beginning of a new chapter. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The distractions, the temptations, and the pressure to succeed in the eyes of others would always be there. But now, Sarah understood that the true success she sought wasn't in the approval of others, but in the peace that came from turning back to Allah with sincerity and repentance. She would need to rebuild her life from the ground up, no longer focused on validation from the outside, but rooted in faith, trust, and patience. With a sense of clarity and determination, Sarah made a promise to herself. I will no longer seek approval from a world that doesn't know me. I will seek only the pleasure of Allah. This wasn't just about finding peace in her faith. It was about creating a life that was centered around what truly mattered, not what the world demanded. As Sarah closed the Quran and stood up, she felt a surge of energy, a quiet but undeniable strength. The path ahead wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. She was ready. Sarah sat quietly, her heart filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. It had been days since she had turned to Allah in prayer, and though her heart was lighter, the uncertainty of her next steps still loomed. It wasn't just a matter of returning to her faith. It was about truly changing the direction of her life. For so long, she had defined herself by the success the world praised. But now, she was ready to embrace something deeper, something that would give her lasting peace. The first prayer she offered after so long felt like a homecoming, a return to something she had abandoned for too long. As she stood in prayer, Sarah's heart was filled with a quiet gratitude, but also a deep sense of guilt. She couldn't help but feel that she had wasted so much time on the wrong things. Her connection with Allah had been lost in the chaos of life, and now she was trying to rebuild it from scratch. But even in her feelings of guilt, there was something else: hope. For the first time, Sarah felt as though she had come back to herself, to the person she was always meant to be. The heavy burden she had carried of perfectionism, social validation, and the fear of being seen as less began to lift. There was a profound peace that she hadn't felt in years, as if a weight was being slowly taken off her chest. Sarah made the decision to set aside her phone and social media for a while. She knew the pull of constant validation was too strong, and she had to protect her newfound peace. She began to spend more time reflecting, reconnecting with her family, and nurturing the relationships that truly mattered. The superficial connections she had once relied on no longer held the same power over her. She returned to small moments of sincerity, helping a neighbor, reaching out to a friend she had neglected, spending time in the quiet of the early mornings when the world was still asleep. These moments felt more meaningful than any luxury or event she had experienced before. They were real, grounded in kindness, and rooted in the values that she had once set aside in the pursuit of fame and success. Sarah's evenings changed too. She no longer felt the need to attend every event or show up at every party just to be seen. Instead, she spent her evenings in solitude, reflecting on her journey and seeking guidance. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were times when the allure of the fast-paced world, the social media buzz, and the temptations of fame and luxury threatened to pull her back. But every time those thoughts crept into her mind, Sarah reminded herself of the peace she had found in the simple, quiet moments of life. The Quran had become her companion again, and she found herself returning to its verses every night. One verse that stood out to her often was, "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." Quran 94:6. Sarah found strength in that verse, especially in the quiet moments when she struggled to stay grounded in her new path. The hardship is the struggle I'm going through now, she thought, but the ease is the peace that Allah promises me if I trust Him. It wasn't easy. There were days when Sarah missed the rush of excitement from her old life. She would occasionally scroll through social media just to see the world moving on without her. But each time, she reminded herself that her value was not determined by followers or likes. It was determined by her sincerity, her faith, and her intentions. This was her journey now, and it was one she was willing to walk with patience. As the weeks passed, Sarah's transformation became more visible, not in the way the world might have expected, but in the way she felt within. Her conversations with friends became deeper. She found herself listening more than talking, truly understanding the struggles and joys of those around her. She had learned to give without expecting anything in return, to love without the need for recognition, and to seek Allah's pleasure in everything she did. One day, as Sarah sat with her family at dinner, laughing and enjoying a peaceful moment, she realized how far she had come. The life she had been living felt so distant, like a story she once told herself. The quiet joy she felt in this moment was the kind of happiness she had been searching for all along, but had never recognized until now. This is real success, she thought, not in the way the world measured success, but in the way her soul now felt aligned with the truth, with her faith, and with her purpose. She had learned that true success was not in what you achieved in the eyes of others, but in the peace you found in yourself, in your connection with Allah. The worldly success she had once sought felt so insignificant now. She had been given the opportunity to start anew, to live a life of purpose, and she was determined to make the most of it. As the weeks stretched on, Sarah's life began to change in ways she hadn't expected. The external pressures, the desire for approval, the constant need for validation from others had begun to fade. But this wasn't just because she had stopped seeking it. It was because she had found something deeper, something that no amount of likes or comments could ever give her, a sense of peace within herself. It was the kind of peace that comes when you stop searching outside for happiness and start finding it in the sincerity of your actions, in the simplicity of your moments, and in the strength of your faith. Sarah's mornings had transformed as well. The sound of the alarm no longer triggered a rush of anxiety about the day ahead. Instead, it signaled a new beginning, a quiet moment to reconnect with herself and with Allah. She would wake up early, before the world around her began to stir, and pray Fajr. The peaceful silence of the early morning hours became her sanctuary, a time to ask Allah for guidance, for patience, and for strength to face whatever the day would bring. Her thoughts were no longer consumed by the never-ending quest for more followers or bigger projects. Instead, her mind was filled with gratitude for the simple moments of peace, for her health, for the support of her family, and for the sense of purpose she had rediscovered. The materialistic desires that once held so much power over her no longer felt so pressing. The voice inside her that once screamed, "More, more, more," had softened, replaced by a quiet but firm reminder that enough was enough. There were times, of course, when the distractions of the world would creep in. She would see others posting photos from lavish events, receiving praise for their achievements, and the temptation to return to that life would briefly take hold. But Sarah had learned to recognize it for what it was, a fleeting moment that promised nothing lasting. Each time she felt that old pull, she reminded herself of what she had gained through her patience, her turning back to Allah. "I don't need the applause," she thought. "I have something far more valuable now." Sarah's commitment to her new path didn't go unnoticed. Her family, once worried about her obsession with social media and external validation, began to see the changes in her. Her conversations were more meaningful, her presence more grounded. She laughed more, listened more, and shared with others in a way that wasn't about what she could gain, but about what she could give. Her relationships deepened, and she found joy in the moments that used to feel mundane. Her connection with her family, her faith, and her community strengthened, and in that, she found a happiness that was more real than any recognition she had ever received from her followers. One evening, as Sarah sat with her mother, talking about her day, she realized how far she had come. Her mother, who had always been patient but concerned about her path, smiled at her. "You seem different, Sarah," her mother said, her voice full of warmth and pride. "You seem at peace." And Sarah, looking at her mother with tears in her eyes, realized just how much truth there was in those words. The peace she had been searching for had never been in fame, but in the quiet, unspoken connection with Allah and the people who truly mattered. She knew that she was on the right path now, but she also understood that this peace was a gift that required continuous effort. It wasn't a one-time change. It was a daily commitment to trust in Allah, to act with sincerity, and to remain steadfast in her faith. Every day was an opportunity to reaffirm her purpose and her faith. Sarah's small acts of kindness began to ripple out into her community. She volunteered at the local mosque, helping with charity events and finding ways to serve others. These actions, though simple, became a source of immense satisfaction. This is what life is about, she realized. Not seeking for myself, but helping others, giving back with sincerity. Her heart, once heavy with doubt and longing, had become light with gratitude and humility. She was no longer living for the approval of others. She was living to please Allah. And in doing so, she had found a joy that transcended anything the world could offer. Every act of worship, every prayer, every moment of reflection filled her with a sense of purpose and fulfillment that could never be found in worldly pursuits. One evening, as Sarah walked through the city, she looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkling above her. It was a moment of quiet reflection, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She knew her journey wasn't over, but she was no longer afraid of the challenges ahead. She had learned that perseverance in faith always brought reward, and that true peace was found in the trust she placed in Allah's plan. With hardship comes ease, she whispered to herself, the verse echoing in her heart. She had faced the hardship of feeling lost, of seeking validation in the wrong places, but now she was experiencing the ease of faith, the ease of living in alignment with her true purpose. As she continued walking, Sarah felt a sense of inner peace that she had never experienced before. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving, rooted in faith and purpose. She had been given a second chance, and she was ready to live it fully. Sarah's journey is a powerful reminder that no matter how far we stray from the right path, Allah's mercy is always there, waiting for us to return. Just like Sarah, we may face moments of doubt, emptiness and struggle, but those challenges are never the end. They are an opportunity for growth, reflection, and a deeper connection with our faith. When we turn back to Allah with sincerity, we discover a peace and purpose that nothing in this world can offer. If you've been feeling lost, uncertain, or like you're chasing something that doesn't fulfill you, remember this: Allah is always calling you back. No matter what you've been through, it's never too late to turn to Him. Let Sarah's story inspire you to reflect on your own life. Are you listening to the whispers in your heart? This is your reminder, your chance to take the first step toward reconnecting with what truly matters, your relationship with Allah. It's time to embrace your journey of transformation, just as Sarah did. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can continue to be inspired and stay connected with our community. And if you're ready for more content that helps you stay grounded in your faith and purpose, click on the next video. Let's continue this journey of growth and reflection together.